discuss public engagement as one of the keys, the key dimensions of responsible research and innovation. Let me say just a few words of introduction to give the main issues that to present the main issues that we are going to discuss. As you all know, public engagement has a high value as such, since inclusiveness is crucial for enriching democracy. In the context of research and innovation, it has also some several instrumental functions that have been discussed in the conference. First, it may help to ensure that the big societal challenges that research and innovation have to address are framed on the basis of widely representative social, economic, and ethical concerns and common principles. And second, public engagement fosters mutual learning, creates agreements on practices and social construction, and contributes to the social construction of innovation. And these can preempt possible public values failures of future innovation. Well, you know all about the responsibility navigator, and you see that public engagement is outlined under one dimension, namely ensuring quality of interactions, that gathers three principles: inclusion, moderation, and deliberation. So we will be discussing on this line. The objective of this session is to discuss the ways public engagement can contribute to responsible research and innovation in the real world, which does not mean that we aim at providing concrete receipts for implementing RRI. The receipts are in the tools session, so we want to reflect on what does it mean for the actors which have to deal with these issues in the real world. As discussed in other sessions, although boundaries between research and innovation are blurred, the stake and practices of public engagement may be different according whether we are in research or whether we deal with innovation processes. And in this session, we will pay attention to these differences. Also, it has been pointed out in the conference that mainstreaming RRI requires to take into account its embeddment within existing institutions and organizations. And this requires to take into account the differences of national context, and contextualization of RRI is really important. So for discussing all these issues within 75 minutes, which is really a challenge, we have the chance to have 6 speakers that are, well, among the best experts on public engagement in their fields of activity. And altogether, they cover a broad range of competencies and activities, from policy formulation to management of research and innovation activities. So I propose to have the following sequence, which is not the one which is on the program. So I will first give the floor to Giuseppe Borsalino, who is in the SWAFS unit at the European Commission. Then we will have Robin Clarke, who is from Sciencewise. Sciencewise is the UK National Centre for Public Dialogue, focused on science and innovation. Then we will have Francoise Lavarde from CNDP, the French National Commission for Public Debate. I will then give the floor to Anne Roulin, who is a vice president at NESTLE, in charge of different issues and noteworthy sustainability. Then we will have Melanie Peters, who is at Rathenau Institute, and we'll conclude with Lars Klüver, and well, everybody knows Lars. So the yes, right. Yes, no? Okay. So we will have to deal with three main questions. So the first question is, what are the lessons drawn from your experience in different areas? Your experience on public dialogue and interaction with stakeholders for responsible research and innovation. Second, does RRI conduct to renew the forms of public dialogue? If so, why? So what are the changes related to RRI? And, well, third, it would be the take-home message. Okay, so Giuseppe, the floor is yours. So, well, the rule is that everybody has 5 minutes in order to have some time for interaction between panel members and general discussion.
Okay, thanks, Pierre. As Pierre said, I'm coming from the Science with and for Society program, which is really focused on responsible research and innovation and public engagement. Actually, I'm dealing with public engagement, just to make clear. What I'm going to say is about a more vision or state of art from inside the Commission. So I'm not talking only about my program, not only about DG Research, but also about the main challenge the Commission has to overcome in the next years, which is about the future, and which is about a question Pierre was mentioning before. It was about how RRI, public engagement, can enter the real world. And my first question is the Commission in the real world? How the Commission can be in the real world? And one of the way we can be in the real world is through the participatory approach, is moving from the tool of public consultation we are using commonly now to public engagement tools to involve people, citizens, stakeholders in policy making and in policy decisions, which are taken usually at institutional level, member states level. This is the big challenge, and what I would like to tell you is where we are, which means we are at the beginning of a process. We have a lot of experience in funding projects dealing with RRI, public engagement, not only at DG Research level, but in many other DGs. If you think just at examples like Futurium, funded by DG Connect. You think about what we do in DG Research. I just quoting the ones you know more. It's, you know, surely you know Voices, which was about inviting citizens and discussing about urban waste all over Europe. About 1,000 citizens were involved, and now we have a follow-up of Voices, which is Simulact, going to do the same, but more focusing on visions of citizens for the future. Again, 1,000 citizens involved, more or less. We have the collective awareness platforms from DG Connect. I'm just quoting some of them because there are many, many initiatives from the Commission side. And we have, for example, also DG Sanco and DG Connect working together to set the EU Innovation Partnership on active and healthy aging. We have the youth portal from DG Education. Just to quote you some, but more than 10 DGs are involved in this process. And I think now we are at the turning point. If I'm talking about science with and for society, we have funded hundreds of projects in the last 15 years. Even DG Connect has funded many projects and DG ARC, etc. But now we have to put all this, what we have learned in practice. and becoming operational. And this discourse is for us, but also for you. We have talked about recommendations, policy briefs. We have had a lot of discussion of the philosophy of responsibility, what does it mean, now how we can really translate this into impact on society. And this is the question we ask ourselves, and we ask also yourself. But coming back to the Commission, because what I want to give you is the picture from inside, and where we are is, 1 minute, where we are is, we are at the point where we have collected a lot of experiences, and now we want to find a way from inside to use this experience and to reach the point where public engagement and citizens are having possibilities to voice their needs. What are the open issues for us for the time being is how we can we address, sorry I'm reading because it's a long sentence, we address the challenge of balancing the views of member states, which are more representative democracy oriented, with views of the public, which is more about direct democracy. We are asking ourselves in which steps of a EU policy cycle it is effective and realistic to have extensive engagement of citizens, and we are looking inside for a shared vision and a shared strategy. The next steps in the last 10 seconds is we are sharing a lot across services. In the past 1 year and a half, we started very recently. We want to involve member states and CSOs in the discussion, civil society organizations, and we want to bring at least to scale a couple of initiatives with greater potential for impact and acceptance. This is what we are trying to do, and we are working inside the Commission to reach this goal. Okay, thanks for the time.
Okay, thanks a lot for this very important message you deliver. I'm sure that we will go back to this question of turning point and the way the EC takes stock of the experience and shares it with stakeholders and member states. So we'll now turn to Robin Clarke, okay, who will report on the UK experience with Sciencewise. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I work for a UK government-sponsored programme called Sciencewise. Back in 2000, the House of Lords Science and Technology Committee, which was a very influential committee in the UK, said there needed to be more public input into areas around science and technology so that the research and policies in that area could better reflect public views and values. Then a few years later, in 2003, there was a public dialogue, public engagement exercise in the UK called GM Nation, which some of you probably heard of. And for many people, it was a poor experience. It tainted the national view when it came to GM, in that it wasn't a particularly balanced discussion about GM, and it's affected it to such an extent that we really still can't talk about that issue. So kind of on the back of that, Sciencewise was launched by the government to try and have fair and balanced debates when it comes to issues of science and technology. And we were formally sort of established in 2007, and since then have done probably hundreds of public dialogue things. Most of our stuff tends to be quite upstream, as in it happens early at a policy development phase before the sort of the national mindset has been set, if you like. And it tends to look around sort of the policy agenda rather than responsible research and innovation. But there are several examples which very clearly link to what we're talking about at this conference. And I just want to briefly touch on one, mainly because looking at the responsibility navigator, I think it looks like one of the case studies in that, and it's synthetic biology, or it's certainly very similar to it. This was a Sciencewise supported dialogue back in 2010, I think it was, where 2 research councils in the UK came together and commissioned a dialogue, 160 odd people in 4 different workshop streams, plus interviews. And part of what that resulted in was a roadmap. I just want to quickly read something from that. And in that roadmap document, it said it's crucial that this technology continues to be developed in a socially responsible fashion. Stakeholders, regulators, and the public must be engaged in the processes from the outset. And what the public in that debate came up with was 5 questions that they thought researchers should always be asking themselves. What is the purpose of the research? Why do you want to do it? What are you going to gain from it? What else is it going to do? And how do you know you were right? So that's a sort of clear example with responsible research and innovation. 2 others I could draw on in the discussion. One is the Babraham Institute, which is a life sciences research body, and the other is the John Innes Centre, which is a plant and microbiology research institute. Again, we've gone down that sort of helping them set the strategic direction for RRI. But the one thing key thing I wanted to get across, which I think is so important in this, is quality. It's the quality of the public interaction that happens. And we recently produced a quality framework, which is available on the website if you look for Sciencewise online. One is it should be the context should be right. There should be a clear hook to it, a clear decision that can be influenced. There should be senior commitment to the outcomes from it. The timing needs to be right, usually early on, and the purpose of the engagement is clear to everyone taking part in it. Secondly, the scope needs to be very good in terms of the issues and opinions covered reflect the interests of all of those involved, so that in the discussion, if you like, the public are hearing the full range of perspectives, the pros, the antis, and everything in between. Then we focus on delivery, to getting governance arrangements that are in place that are right, making sure it's a as fair a process as you can make it, so as little inbuilt bias as possible. The right public are engaged in it. There's the right balance between discussions, information, good, the usual sort of stuff you'd expect, good facilitation, good data collection, thorough, effective approach to analysis, and a clear and coherent reporting. Then the other thing where I think we want to see further work is on impact. How were the results from the dialogue disseminated and used? Did it have credibility with decision makers? Did they treat it with equal seriousness as they would other forms of evidence? Because that's essentially what we view this as being. And did it make a difference? The one question, just to finish up, I wanted to answer, which was posed, I think, what would be our unique recommendation from the UK experience? And I think as would be very much focus on, don't fear the public. And I think Viv said this earlier, that people sort of are risk averse. They fear that the public are going to be very conservative. And then someone else said something about use deliberative approaches. And those were the 2 things I was thinking. Don't fear the public and use deliberative approaches. There's different types of public voices out there. If you ask someone something where they may know little about it and you don't provide them any information, we probably shouldn't be surprised that we get a top of mind, possibly fairly uninformed response and probably quite reactive, not wanting to see progress. But provide people with the information, give them the time to understand that information, use that information, discuss that information, and you often end up pleasantly surprised, and it can give you the reassurance as researchers to move forward with innovation.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, we will come back to several points you mentioned. One of them is impact. Actually, impact is very important, but it is a tricky issue when dealing with, impact in general, but with public engagement. So I'm sure that we'll come back to some of the questions you touch upon. Okay, so now I give the floor to Francoise Lavarde from CNDP. So from the UK experience to the French one. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So good morning to everybody. First, I want to thank you, the organizer, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to explain how we organize public debate in France. So you'll find a few leaflets just behind me explaining what CNDP is. And also, it will be the opportunity for me to share with you the experience we had while tackling with subjects in relation to responsible research and innovation. So public debate was introduced in the French environmental law in 1995. Public debate it's a formal procedure basically based on 2 tools, public meetings that lasting 2 to 3 hours, in which people gather, they hear experts, they have presentation of the project, of the question at task, and they discuss together, they can ask questions and have, of course, answers. And the other main tool is a website where you have users forum, frequently asked questions, and also a comprehensive documentation. As it has been said, it's very important to give public all information available. And the public dialogue, public debate is driven by 5 values. The one, first, independency and neutrality. This is attached to the National Commission of Public Debate. We are independent from government, parliament, local authorities, or project developers. And we are neutral, as we never express opinion on the debated project. Another value is transparency. We have to ensure that all data and studies related to the project are made available, and if necessary, we can decide to do additional studies. Another point, very important point, is inclusiveness. It's free. Everybody can attend a public meeting. No choice at the entrance. And the CNDP makes every effort to ensure that all members of the public, regardless of status and opinion, are able to express themselves freely within an environment of mutual respect. And the last point is that you have to argue your opinion. It's just when you take part in a public debate, it's impossible to say just yes or no. You have to say yes because, no because, and with the argumentation that will help the other attendant to dialogue with you. So that's the, and to end, I should say that the very important point for public debate is the timing of the debate inside the project planning. The public debate has to take place at a time when no definite decision has been taken, that is to say, all scope are open, but at a time when you already have enough information on the subject, because if you have no information, it's impossible to discuss. It's rather long, it takes a rather long time. You see, I think it's at least 12 months to conduct a public debate between the time we decide to go to organize a public debate and the time a decision is taken. So a public debate aims to help the project developer to take a decision, go or no go, and to cast in light the main preoccupation of the public about the project. I think that's very important, because when you organize a negotiation with a representative from the institutions or representative from associations or labor trade unions, well, sometimes the preoccupation of lay people are difficult to discover or to hear. So public debate helps lay people to express their questions, to express their preoccupation about the project in debate. So the CNDP had twice the opportunity to organize public debate on questions dealing with research and innovation. The first one was in 2009, when we organized a public debate on nanotechnologies, and in 2013, when we had to organize a public debate on the underground storage of radioactive waste. Since its creation, the CNDP has conducted over 80 public debates. So I can say we have a rather huge experience about public debate. But when we tackle those two specific subjects, we came across many difficulties, mainly because it was nearly impossible to organize public meetings, where there were some opponents, a few number of opponents who came in each meeting saying, well, if you discuss, it means that you accept the project, so you shouldn't discuss, and with the make lots of noise, it was impossible to have the public meetings. So we had to discuss on the net with live conference. We used newspapers, but it was not exactly the same. And many people say, well, on those two topics, there were no public debate. Well, for us, that's wrong, but it's what people say. So I think that's a problem. What we've learned about this failure is that first the time. Oh, the time. Yeah, the time. Oh, yes. So we have the time of debate, as I said, is very important. You have to have a very good question. For nanotechnology, the question was too broad. It was impossible to tackle all the aspects. You have to give information sometimes, and good information, not to frighten people. You have the problem to bring in the debate people in favor of the project. Generally, people in favor of a project don't take part to the debate. And a public debate should not be only at the beginning. It should have many phases. You can first have the public debate, then go on with research and more information, and then another phase of public debate, and so on. So that's one for...
Okay, thanks so much, Francoise, for this presentation, for sharing with us some of the difficulties of public debate and public engagement. It's not always a smooth and easy way, so we have also to reflect on this type of difficulties, because learning is about being confronted to these difficulties. Actually, well, I'm French, so I'm biased, but what is fantastic with France is that within the quintessence of the technocracy, we need a law to organize the public debate, but despite that, actually the contestation is so strong that we have some difficulties that have to be overcome. Okay, so Anne Roulin, Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, Anne Roulin, I'm responsible for nutrition and sustainability within research and development at NESTLE. For a private company of any size to really implement and embrace responsible research and innovation, it can't be something in isolation just within the research and development community. It has to be anchored in the way the company does business. And I mentioned already earlier our business principles, but our whole way of doing business is around creating shared value. We firmly believe that for a company to be successful over time, you have to create value for society. So for all the stakeholders, for our farmers, our suppliers, for the communities, our employees, etc. And so this really brings us directly into inclusivity and responsibility, because it's an integral part of creating shared value. But now coming practically how we do it in terms of research and development, we have what we call an innovation sweet spot. And within all our projects, we're trying to get to this sweet spot, which we picture in terms of overlapping circles. So, of course, the project has to make, the innovation has to make commercial sense. We have to have the technologies in order to deliver it. It has to be really desired by consumers, and it has to be sustainable and meet our principles of creating shared value. So I'll just give a couple of examples of how, with respect to consumers, this whole aspect of inclusivity with consumers, how we do that, and then in sustainability. So all the products we're developing go through consumer testing. And this begins at a very early phase when it's just an idea we're exploring. We do this in focus groups with consumers. So discussing, what would this product really mean? How would they use it? What are they looking for? So that's the kind of early phase research. Focus groups. We use today a lot of online research, of course, to enable us to get to a broader number of consumers. That's when the concept is more defined. And then when we're close to the end of the development, we do very detailed taste testing. We do blind testing with our product, either an old product or the competitor's products, to compare that. So a whole series of testing with consumers, bringing this notion of inclusivity in the development process. And then with respect to sustainability, we started some years ago an approach that we call sustainability by design. You have to build this in right at the beginning of the product development cycle. If the assessments are only done later on, it's too late. All the things are fixed, and you can the cost of change and the time to change is too big. So sustainability by design, how do we do it? We need to put in the hands of all our product developers practical tools that allow them to make fact-based decisions. Well, full life cycle assessment, it really to be done properly, requires experts. And, we can't make all our 4,000 research and development employees experts in life cycle assessment. So together with an outside company, we developed a tool that is based on life cycle assessment, but with a simplified interface that allows us to calculate the environmental impact of a product. And this covers the entire value chain. So our value chain goes from agriculture through the processing, packaging, distribution, the use by consumers, and right through to end of life, including waste. And the tool allows us to calculate a series of indicators: greenhouse gas emissions, non-renewable energy and minerals, land use, water use, and something we call ecosystem impact, which is mostly related to biodiversity loss. So this gives us a very balanced view of the environmental impact of the product. And we really use it right at the beginning of the process to look at the choices we have. We have a whole series of checklists with questions that we ask our product developers to really have they investigated, different parameters, how they can reduce environmental impact. And they repeat the assessment during the development process as the concepts and the innovations are refined. So this is really one of the key ways that we implement this sustainability by design. And it's mandatory in all our product developments. So we have at any one time in the company about 12,000 research and development projects going on. So this is why we have to have such practical tools. The development of this was also very collaborative because one of the things we were really missing was upstream agriculture data. And that is crucially important for the environmental impact of our products. So we formed a World Food Database group to develop sets of life cycle inventory data on the agricultural impact. And we have 10 companies, including fertilizer companies, seed companies, food companies, and the French government and the Swiss government put money into this. And we prioritized the first 200 data sets because in the existing life cycle assessment databases like EcoInvent, there's very little agricultural data. So this is now well underway, and when the work is completed, this will be publicly available. So this is also an example of participatory approaches. Maybe just to finish up, we're collaborating in an enormous number of working groups. Things like the UN 10-year framework programme on sustainable food systems. It was originally launched by the FAO and UNEP. It's now actually being led by the Swiss government and the South African government. A World Economic Forum group on food and nutrition security. ILSI, the International Life Science Institute, a group on sustainable nutrition modelling, a group with the WWF, the Consumer Goods Forum. So we're really working in cross-sector and cross-industry working groups to, both contribute but also further refine the approaches we're using.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. The issue of shared values, of course, is very important. And I feel that in this conference, many often was expressed the concern that for companies, all this is very costly and doesn't bring value. Actually, your experience shows that it may be a bit different, and that developing shared values with all the stakeholders, shareholders, but also the consumers, may be something very important for the companies. So we'll come back to that. So we have two speakers now, Melanie and Ralph, and I must say that actually they represent the institutions that have been the main actors in what we call the participatory turn for technology assessment in Europe. So they are in some sense the best place to help us to think about how to think the interactions between public engagement and RRI. So first, Melanie, the director of Rathenau, and then Ralph.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. We were not part of one of the projects that are discussed here, but we are partners of many of you in the room, either because we work on parliamentary technology assessment and we're in a network, EPTA, we worked on a big project, PACITA, across Europe. Or because you're based in industry or based at universities. I think it's very important to organize this meeting and to look across the projects, what the harvest is from these projects, and also to connect them to other ways of thinking, like we just heard, the CSR framework. I won't be speaking in any of the languages we discussed this morning. My background is toxicology. I was trained in risk assessment. Then I went to corporate social responsibility. And we were talking about, is RRI, is it social responsibility? I think it is. If you look at the OECD guidelines that cover the behavior of multinational companies, then responsible research is a paragraph in that. And I think that the work that we're discussing in these 2 days really feeds into and clarifies how you could look at this paragraph. So there's many connections. On the Rathenau Institute, yesterday we were saying we need success stories on RRI. We need to show that it works. And actually our institute came from a success story. Rathenau, he was the director of the Philips laboratory that was working on the microelectronics. And he had a vision. He said computers won't, in a few years' time, not those things that fill offices and that are only there for administrative purposes. It will be a thing that's on your desk, and all of us will have and own a computer, and people couldn't imagine this. But he realized, if I'm going to sell these things and I'm going to make people familiar with this, I need to engage the public. So there was an economic drive, but it was also an enlightened thinker who said, if this needs to work, then I need to really make sure that people start using it, that it's also built in a way that people will use it. And he had a worry, a concern was that politicians would not know about technology and would fear it, and that they would resist it. So he said, we need an institute, and this became later the Rathenau Institute. Of course, he didn't choose this name, that is there to inform the public and engage the public, and is also there to show politicians what technology can do, but also make them aware of pitfalls of technology. So that is a success story, and that's something that keeps us going to say, yes, it is necessary to look at developing technologies and to look at how they can land in society, and we need to connect it to the policy level. At the moment, the discussion we're in is the one of robots, and if they will make labor disappear. Actually, we did a large study into this, and our parliament was not interested. Some people said, well, robots will come anyway, and other people would say, we don't like robots. And now all of the political parties realize we need to be forward-thinking about this. We need to look at it just as we did in the times of the entrance of the personal computer. We need to look at how we can implement it. And we have to really look at educating people and also make sure that those people that lose their jobs will get new jobs. I can share all the lessons you provided from France and the UK. That the way you have to design processes, it has to be very early, it has to involve people also in what process to choose. So that's exactly our experience as well, and you have to be honest. People can't be, are you just asking them to think with you? Are you asking them to act and to be involved in also in implementation? The important thing that we learned is that involving the public is never about sampling opinions, but you really have to go to the deeper level. And I can give two experiences. We were involved in the national science policy agenda. The idea was to ask the public to come up with questions for science, and two scientists went onto national television and they asked, please give us your questions. And I thought, oh, now, this is really not the way to make a science agenda, and it will disappoint the public. And one example of a question was a person who was suffering from heart complaints, and he asked, how can I have a healthy life and then drop dead and not suffer for 20 years? But it was taken up by the scientists as how to prevent heart failure. But for the general public, for this person, quality of life was not to live as long as possible. It was to live healthily and then have a quick death. So what you could do is use a World Cafe setting, which is what we did. And I'm looking at Sarah Heesterbeek with the King Baudouin Foundation. They developed this method. It's the G1000 method, in which you really enter a dialogue. What is it about death and about health? And then you don't go to opinions or statements, but you go to values. And then you will come to different insights than if you just ask people about opinions. So this is what we did for this national science agenda. You asked about impact. Were we successful? We wrote a report. We gave it to the people who drafted the agenda. I think they didn't get it all. We sort of, they found it still very difficult that you cannot take a question from the public at face value, that you have to really understand what feelings are behind it. But there is more understanding of it's not just the public asking a question, the scientist answering. There is something, we have to go to collective values. It's the other, impact, I think in the robot discussion, yes, we have the example, the historical example of the PC, but it's a process that you contributed to in all the projects that we presented. It's like you say, it's not done in one day, it's a constant dialogue and a mutual understanding. And what is difficult, someone mentioned the elephant in the room. Of course, we know which values we cherish. They're often individual values, but what we've really lost is the language to talk about collective values. Our religious language doesn't work for everyone. It's been misused, it's outdated. Our maybe Marxist language doesn't work. We've been disappointed in everything that happened there, I guess. And we have somehow not found another language to name what we share. And that's what we were, what we're all looking for. Yeah, and I guess maybe that's a good thing for Europe. That's where Europe. René van Schomburg was mentioning it yesterday when he went to the treaty, and he was looking which values are in there. Then he was accused of being a Marxist. But of course, we all know that we have these collective values, but we may differ about them, and it doesn't mean we know which innovations we want. But somehow we have to rebuild this, and I guess that's what these projects were also about: how to balance, how to be inclusive, how to give room to differences of opinion, but also to how to come to conclusions on what innovations we want. But it's a large project because we do like the language, I guess. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I give the floor to Lars.
Thanks, Pierre-Benoit. I don't know if everybody knows me as Pierre-Benoit said, but I'm the director of the Danish Board of Technology. And I've been engaged in public participation in science and technology assessment for, goddamn, 30 years. What I will do now is I'll try to say, where are we with public engagement? What is new with regards to putting into the RRI idea? And also, what is it we need? Where is the action needed with regard to public engagement in RRI? Try to see if I can, in my 5 minutes, do that. First of all, where are we? We know from 30 to 50 years of experience with different participatory processes that citizens and actors are capable. They can work with incredibly complex issues, and they come up with incredibly good results. We know that. Don't be afraid of that. They can do it. That's very important things. Don't underestimate their intelligence, and don't overestimate their knowledge. So many of the processes we do, we need to feed them knowledge, and when they get that knowledge, then they can use their intelligence, which is extremely high. Where do we know that from? Well, from technology assessment, parliamentary technology assessment, constructive technology assessment, foresight, action research from back in the 50s and 60s up to now, from CSR exercises all around the world, from citizen science, and I can just continue. We have very many situations where citizens are engaged in things that are relevant for science, technology, and innovation policy and RRI, and it's 50 to 30 years of experience. They can do it. We have the methods. I just coordinated a project, Engage 2020, in which we made a global scan for methods that could be used in RRI. Public participation methods could be used in RRI. We came up with 57 mother methods and a lot of variants, and it basically covers the whole field. I will come back to that. The only place where I would say we still need research and still need to develop is online and blended methods. With blended methods, I mean methods where face-to-face participation is connected to online facilities in some way. That's where the development should be. That's where we are not good enough. But you cannot come up with a situation where we cannot come up with a method. That's my postulate, basically. So the methods are there. The experts are there. There should be more of them. I'll come back to that. But there are experts in this field. And so it's possible to find people who can advise, who can guide, who can help people do it or do it themselves. And I think there's experience that's everywhere in the RRI system. And I see the RRI system as others might have others' opinions as always, but I see it as connecting to policy, science, technology, innovation policy, to agenda setting in research and innovation, to institutional problems in science and technology and innovation, and to doing science and innovation. So there are 4 levels: policy, agenda setting, institutions, questions, and the actual innovation and scientific activities. On all these 4 complexity levels, you could say, we have methods that fit in. There's no problem. You can use it. We have, on the lowest level, activity level with citizen science, action research, different kinds of activities, all different kind of workshopping methods. With steering, we have all different kinds of methods. With agenda setting, we have ways you can include citizens in making research and innovation agendas. On the policy level, we have many, many years of experience of engaging citizens in making science and technology policy. So, in all these areas, we have the methods. This Engage 2020 project covered all these methods and put them into an online tool. And if you have your computer in front of you, you can click into it. It's called actioncatalog.eu, in which there are 57 mother methods. There are 90 criteria, which you can click in on the different kinds of facilities you want from those, qualities you want from those methods, and it will suggest different methods for you. So we even have systems so that you can pick your methods with quite big precision now. So what is then new in regards to RRI? When I'm saying we have it all, what is new then? I think there are especially two things that are new. One thing is that we're beginning to move these methods upstream. We're not on policy and agenda setting only now. We're beginning to put it into the actual science, technology, and innovation system. And that is new. So basically you can say what is new in RRI is that the science, technology, and innovation system catches up with the rest of society. It begins to use a systemic way of thinking with regards to making its business. I mean, businesses like NESTLE have been thinking in systemic governance for 25 years probably. Now, the new thing is the science begins to do it as well, which is interesting, but a little late. Okay, what can we do from now on to then make it go faster and really work? I think one thing that is very important is to lower the threshold of doing these things. Because a lot of scientists, a lot of institutions, university leaders, institute leaders out there, they're afraid of this because they have no experience with it. And so we have to lower the threshold for them. It will work for them, but we have to lower the threshold. How can we do that? First of all, we have to get the message out to them that the methods are there. They do not need to experiment with this. They can just take the experiences that's already been done, and they can copy, they can make variants, and so on. That's one thing. Another thing is to get the message across the board that there's nothing to be afraid of here. We talked a lot about if this is arrestment and if this is stopping innovation. No, it's not. This is a contribution to science and to innovation, and it's a positive contribution. And there are very, very few examples of it not being a positive contribution, actually. So also to learn not to be afraid of it, see it as a resource instead of a hindrance. That's very important, I think. And then also to get it out to them that if they cannot do it themselves, then there are people that can help them. They can invite people into their consortia. They can hire consultancy firms on subcontracting. They can do many things. But there are people out there who can help them. And finally, capacity building. I said that there are experts there, and I also said, but there needs to be more. We have a very big difference across the European map of where the experts are. And we need capacity building so that this can work all over Europe. We need capacity building so that this can work both in policy agenda setting institutions and in the science activities. But it can be done, and I'm very happy to hear Giuseppe say that we're in the impact phase now. I totally agree with Giuseppe. This is about beginning to have this experience, getting impact, and begin to use it, and it can be done. We can lower that threshold if we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all for all the important thoughts you provided. So we now have a lot of things on the table, and it's time to give the floor to the audience. So who wants to begin with the first remark, reaction? Yeah. So can you introduce yourself? So you are two on the list.
Yes, Monica Schofield. I think earlier I referred to myself as the convener of the task force of the European Industrial Research Management Association. but I'm also Director of International Cooperation at TUTEC, which is a knowledge transfer company belonging to Hamburg University of Technology. I would like to pick up on the remarks of Lars and direct them a little bit to Giuseppe and ask, is the Commission thinking about having citizens determine how the framework programme money should be spent? The reason I ask this is that in 2004, at the very first European Science Forum, there was a very interesting session about citizens' participation in determining research agenda. There was a gentleman from the Alzheimer's Association in the UK, and they had experimented with the members of that association determining how the research budget should be spent for the Alzheimer's Association. And building on what Lars said, the interesting thing about that is that he said that only in one case would he have disagreed with the decision of the constituents. Now, I was on the sounding board, Commissioner Potchnick's sounding board for the setting up of Framework 7, and I proposed that there should be a part of the budget of the framework programme reserved for allowing citizens to decide on projects. And the reaction of the Commission was kind of, as Lars would say, this terrified board syndrome. Oh my God, they can't be trusted. So I put the gauntlet down again. Are you thinking in these terms? Citizens' participation in determining how money should be spent on science?
Well, Giuseppe, it's for you. Well, they do that via the Parliament to some extent.
Yes, it's via the Parliament, and we are still there. We means that we are still with this deliberative approach, or deliberative democracy, representative democracy. Sorry. I think we have still to work a lot to reach this point. I believe in it. I think there is a general movement, not only, I would say, outside the Commission, which means in society, going in this direction. I'm not talking only about how to decide about funding, but I'm talking about the principle of participative democracy. So we are going in this direction. The Commission will follow a bit later, I guess. And at the same time, okay, there is just a declaration from Juncker's talking about the importance of citizens and how research and innovation should be citizen-centric. Unfortunately, is using also another word, citizen and user-centric, which bring us until to this paradigm of growth, competitiveness, and industry-oriented, economic-oriented system. But, okay, I can tell you there is a movement inside the Commission going in this direction and trying to work in this direction. This is what I can tell you. Yeah, but okay, we are still far from.
Thanks. Lars, just a word on this.
Well, first of all, I can just acknowledge that there are experimentation in the Commission about this. We have, there's a post out there, the Simulac project, where citizens make visions that are transformed into research issues. There's the Voices project, the Civisty project. So there has been experimentation of taking citizens' needs and vision and try to convert them into innovation and research issues. But the second thing I would say is that it's a very interesting question you put, because out in society, we are already beginning to use participatory budgeting a lot. And I mean, again, science should begin to catch up. I travel around these years talking with municipality leaders, directors, politicians about how they could install participatory budgeting, and they are experimenting a lot, and they have very good experience with it.
Okay. Yeah, yes, you.
I could just very quickly add. I mean, for example, we had a European project.
No, sorry, but we have a lot of people who want to speak. So after, yeah. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. No, you are the fourth. So.
Okay, sorry.
So Mr. there, yeah. Yeah.
Can I talk? Oh, okay. So my name is Ale Okada, the Open University, and I would like to know more about. Sorry, it's my turn or not?
No, it was not. But go on. Yeah,
oh.
Yeah. No.
Sorry. I would like to know more about the technology at scale. Yes, so Anne mentioned that in NESTLE, you use some instruments to examine the consequences and also the impact. And Lars mentioned that this is something missing, online tools, technology, because if you wanted to engage public participation at scale, so we need sorry, we need the technology. I was involved in the NESTLE Health Kids program, that's global initiative, lots of successful stories. And I also would like to know how NESTLE is capturing the legacy of the initiatives, how measuring the benefits of that. This is a huge initiative. In Brazil, we had great outcomes. So I'd like to know more about it.
So the Nestle Healthy Kids program is continuing. It's implemented now in over 65 countries. The programs take a different nature, the specifics of it in country by country, because it's always done in a participatory manner, either with the local health ministry, local NGOs, etc. So they have specific metrics according to the to their situation. But what we're tracking is the number of children reached and the number of countries. And we have set up just last year a program called United for Healthy Kids, where we're really trying to bring in more partners into this. And it was actually launched in Mexico and the Philippines, two countries that are very different. Mexico, as you well know, a lot of obesity issues. The Philippines, a lot of issues with malnutrition, as we heard today. And this is really a social movement. And we are really evaluating right now what are the metrics we can use. We've got healthy behaviours that we'd like to help to promote. And the challenge is, you know, you've hit the nail right on the head, how you actually measure the progress of that programme. But this is really work in progress.
Okay, thanks. So you want to take the opportunity, yeah?
My name is Joachim Schiemann from Germany, Julius Kühn Institute. We have been discussing some success stories, and I might offer one. So I have been coordinating a quite large 6 million EU project called GRACE, GMO Risk Assessment and Communication of Evidence, which was finalized end of November last year. So we started about 3.5 years ago. And just from the beginning, we have been involving stakeholders. We have been involving 5 stakeholder workshops, inviting about 1,000 stakeholders per workshop, attendance of about 50, so all stakeholder organizations have been represented. We also worked with a very high level of transparency. So we published, for example, all our original data from feeding trials and so on and so on. We answered also the accusations against us by parts of the protest industry in a very open-minded and fair way. We established a scientific discussion forum and so on and so on. Our experiences were, I think, very positive, especially concerning transparency and stakeholder involvement, though the workload was very high, but it was very efficient, and even in such a hot topic like genetically modified organisms in agriculture, we were able to provide a very fair frame for our stakeholder involvement. Even those stakeholders who sent in parallel letters to my minister, for example, requesting to fire me, or to the European Commission or the European Ombuds lady and so on, or members of the parliament, they behaved. During our workshops, we also tried to behave. And so we had a very useful atmosphere. We published all the protocols, questions, answers, and so on. I think very important, as it has been said, is the timing. We involved the stakeholders just from the beginning, so we discussed drafts of our study plans with them, and we really showed that they had an influence on the studies. We involved them also when we have been discussing conclusions and recommendations. Another point is transparency. I like it very much what has been presented by Anne concerning the data on life cycle analysis. In the frame of GMO risk assessment, we have the problem that the data from the industry are not available, at least not available to work with it. So you can approach EFSA, and then you can get all the data sets from the industry, with the exception of the very few confidential, which are only dealing with sequence information. So 99% of the documents are freely available. So you can get it, you can read it, but you cannot work with it. So you cannot perform a meta-analysis with that gray literature. So for that, you have to contact and you have to get the consent from the data owner. So I would very much appreciate if the industry would be more open in that respect and would provide also data for others to work with it, which are part of the applications, for example.
Thanks for this message. I guess that it doesn't require an answer by the panel, and we can go to the other questions. Well, please be as short as possible. So, Mr. there and there. So, introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. It's my name's Rob Terry from the World Health Organization, and thanks very much to the panel for a very practical and, I mean, sometimes sober experience that they've had. My question really is, how do you balance input from individuals, the public as individuals, and that advice which comes in an aggregated form, either from an NGO or a civil society group, and the different weightings and the biases that comes, because that's a problem, particularly when you're operating at a global level or supranational level. How do you really obtain input from the world?
We see that you come from epidemiology or something like that, no? Okay, Lars, can...
I think you have to do separate processes for that. I mean, don't mix it up. Don't pretend that NGOs are citizens and the citizens can represent NGOs. It cannot be done. So make a series of activities where you cover both of them. Simple. That's very short to answer.
Okay, thanks. I will give the last word to the members of the panel. So I tell you what is the main message for the Commission. So it will be your last word. So, yes.
Yep, one quick comment and two questions, but I'm trying to be quick. I think the discussion focused very much also the best case example on how to do public engagement, and we've heard it luckily from several colleagues, from Melanie and from Robin. That's maybe the issue is still more the why and the when. Like in Britain, you have this knowledge creation process or the value creation process, and to move upstream that process is exactly the question: how much agenda setting will be in the process of public engagement, and from that philosophical discourse to get into the implementation phase, which now, as we all agree, is the challenge. Just to add that there's a project now for the next 4 years which is expected to do exactly that. There's a poster out there that's a Nucleus project, so that was the self-promotion part. The two questions, one to Anne, if I may, from NESTLE. You talked in your sustainability examples very much about the environmental aspects of it. As you definitely know better than I do, there are three main aspects which are usually defined. There's also the economic and then the social sustainability, which the latter is probably the rather more interesting for us from an RRI perspective, and the United Nations would probably then add the fourth dimension of the cultural sustainability. So where is that in the NESTLE strategy? And the second question, public engagement, we would all agree, and since this is the family meeting of people who agree, shouldn't be a means to an end. But I get a bit of an impression that it, for many of you, is a means and not an end. And the end focus would make it more a process focus than a activity focus. So that's more like the third mission of a university, the quadruple helix, the civic university, and these ideas, the big ideas.
Yes. Question about social sustainability. I just didn't have time to talk about it. We're working intensively on how to analyse social sustainability. But this is really, the methodologies are just not existing today. You know, in a practical way, in this, similar to what I described for environmental sustainability. I mean, it's like life cycle assessment was 20 years ago. The databases are not existing, so it's not in a phase that we could roll it out for our whole organisation. What we have done is we've been working on some of the methodologies that have been developed, like the UNEP CETAC. There's a whole document and an approach to social sustainability. That has been taken in an industry working group who have tried to develop some more practical ways of doing it. So we worked on a case study with one of our suppliers, looking at milk products in Pakistan, which is a very complex supply chain, a complex issue. And it was a project that took us several months to do. Well, this is impossible in the context of 12,000 projects running at any one time. Huh? So what we've decided to do in the meantime, while the whole area of social sustainability assessments are becoming more developed, is to take a very pragmatic approach and to analyse all our projects with respect to our priorities in creating shared value, water, nutrition and rural development, with respect to our external commitments, and with respect to our responsible sourcing priorities and guidelines. So we have developed a more simple methodology that allows us to assess projects in that way. And this is our first pragmatic step in that direction.
Okay, thanks. It is on the agenda, but difficult. Okay, so we cannot take any more questions. So there will be for the lunchtime. So I want to give all the panel members the opportunity to say a last word. So we will outpass the time of the session. So in the same order, perhaps as the first intervention. So Giuseppe, you are the first. So less than 1 minute because we have to go to lunch.
From my side, I have a message for all of you. And the message is the main keyword for us for the future will be impact and involvement of beneficiaries, which are part of our next projects. We are thinking of the right way. We are looking for the right way to ask to all participants to our projects to engage themselves in institutional change since the beginning. And this is what we miss for the time being.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
I think my main message would be to think about, and I think it picks up on a couple of the questions that were asked, and it's not to think about public engagement as a process, it's something you have to do, but it's for what purpose is it? And I think there's two main things it can deliver. One is it adds to the evidence base that policymakers, decision makers have. It can bring different experiences, different expertise, and thereby help improve decisions. And that's certainly our thinking at Sciencewise, why we're in it. I mean, there is that nice sort of democratic feel to it, but it's primarily about trying to improve the quality of policy and decision making. And the second one is, and this was someone, a regulator in the UK, when I said to him, you know, what did you get out of the public engagement work that we did for you? And he said, it stopped me having sleepless nights. In essence, what it meant was it gave him the confidence to move forward in what was a very contentious area. Before that, he really did not know what the public's views and values were. And it had stopped a very important scientific advance, moving from the lab into treatment available to everyone in the UK. So it was that sort of confidence that he thought, I can move forward with this now.
Okay, thanks. Francoise?
Thank you. Well, as I'm involved in organizing public engagement, well, I think it would be a message perhaps for all of us. According to me, we don't have actually the accurate tools to deal with RRI. As Lars said, there are many tools for public engagement, but there are still some that has to be developed. And as I read in the literature, generally RRI is tackled via mini-public conference of consensus, focus, so on. And as I explained you, we are dealing with a big public gathering. And what we are looking for is something in between, mixing the advantages of both. We are trying to do this. We are reflecting. We had an experience this year with the Danish Board of Technology that was the worldwide youth on climate and energy. You can also find leaflets about this. And I think we still have to work on this, of course, with the Danish Board of Technology, in order to reflect and to have new tools for public engagement, especially for RRI.
Okay, thanks, Francoise. Anne?
Okay, I think the message is that the private sector is actually doing a lot in this area, not calling it RRI, but you know, actually implementing systemic governance, as Lars put it. And so I think more interactions on this to learn from each other.
Okay. Melanie.
Yeah, I would call upon the responsibility of the Commission. I think citizen centers doesn't mean that citizens decide. Voices have to be taken into account to improve decisions, but it doesn't come instead of existing democratic institutions. So be clear about who has responsibility for what. And we have a lesson from, for instance, a nuclear waste program in the Netherlands, where citizens said, don't make me talk about things I don't know. I want to talk about part of it, but also some has to be taken responsibility by scientists, some by politicians. Don't push it onto the public.
Well, Pierre-Benoit, you asked about messages to the EC. I would say also to the member states, because I think many member states lag very much behind here. I actually think that the EC pushes a lot already. But we need experimentation on online and blended methods. That's an area where what we had out there is lousy. Facebook doesn't work for this, to be honest. So we simply need development in that. So that's a real challenge. There has to be experimentation probably over the next 10 years in this area. Online and blended methods. I think, don't be afraid, actually push it into RRI and participation into being a mandatory thing in the calls, so that people actually get experience with this and find out it's not something to be afraid of. I think it's very important. Invest in capacity building. We need to have projects which in themselves has the aim of building capacity across Europe. Very concrete, out in country X, and see if we can build up capacity there. And then I think one thing which is important is we already got a piece of the road, but this is a project system, and a project starts and it ends, and then it has produced something which begins to deteriorate. I think that's ridiculous in this area. Look at RRI tools. I just mentioned Engage 2020, the online system. That system will deteriorate if we do not put some efforts into it in the future. Where is that system? I think the Commission should begin to develop service contracts, not big ones, but service contracts, so that some of these systems that are being built up to help people are continued and still kept alive and in the high quality.
Okay, thank you. So it's the end of the session. So thank you all for this very interesting contribution. And let me, join me in applauding all the panel members.